My first point is don't focus on producing an artwork. That might seem crazy. Aren't we learning to draw because we want to produce artworks? Well, yes, and on a good day, that happens. But when I'm learning to draw, it's the drawing process which is a better focus than having an artwork at the end of the drawing session. And sometimes this is easier to see in a different artistic area. Consider a pianist playing the piano, and that playing a composed piece of music is the equivalent of an artist creating a drawing. But in learning to play the piano so that they could play composed pieces, the pianist didn't line up a whole lot of pieces of music and attempt to play them one after the other. They started with simple pieces of music. In fact, probably not pieces of music at all, but simple musical phrases and exercises which were to design the development of the skills they would need to play those composed pieces as quickly and as well as possible. A limited number of skills that could be practiced over and over in a short period of time so that mastery of them, at least to a competent level, came sooner, and then to progress from skill to skill to skill to skill. All the time then playing pieces that became progressively more demanding, which combined these separate skills which they'd been working on in their practice sessions. And yet mostly these musical phrases that made up their actual practice sessions probably never appeared in any composed piece of music. But in practicing them, it was equipping them with the tools they would need to play those more complex and varied composed pieces of music. This approach stopped them from being overwhelmed with too many things to learn all at once, and certainly too many things to learn to do well all at once. And when we first learn a skill, we can often lack the understanding to be a realistic judge about the level of skill that we've actually got to. I learnt the violin briefly when I was 12, and I remember playing these very scratchy renditions of Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head. And because I could recognize the tune, I was amazed. I was amazed that I could play anything recognizable in such a short period of time. But I lacked understanding of the art to realize I was playing it badly. And my rendition would bring no joy to anyone who either understood music or who knew this song. And it can be just the same with drawing. If we're rushing to push out, in our mind, finished drawings one after the other, we can lack the understanding to know that they're really not very good. And that means I can stay in a place of drawing where not only am I not developing my skills, but I'm reinforcing acceptance of a lower level of skill than I realize, because I don't know what I don't know. So when I'm learning to draw, I shouldn't be focusing on producing drawings as such, but I should focus on learning to draw that will take me to the place of drawing I want to get to. The second thing you shouldn't do if you want to learn to draw is to think that drawing is basically just letting all of my natural talent flow out of me. That if I'm going to be able to do it, it will just happen. And I think this is why the mistake in the first point is often made, that there's a focus on producing an artwork every time I draw, because there's the expectation that I will be able to. And I think this mindset comes from not appreciating the fact that drawing is a skill that we need to practice, practice, practice. It is not something that I can just pick up and do to a high level. I think our piano playing comparison is a helpful one here again. Nobody expects to be able to learn the piano without constant and regular practice, but it's practicing in a carefully thought out, systematic way. And while the activity of playing a musical piece is not exactly the same as the activity of drawing, the overall principle is the same. To be able to draw well requires skills that we need to develop. And some of these we may develop fairly unconsciously because we're observant and motivated. But some of them may be skills that we don't even appreciate are skills that we could learn, or we don't realize necessarily, particularly at the start, that we need to learn them. When I was 12, I learnt the violin for a few months, and after a few months, I could manage some very scratchy renditions of a song at the time, Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head. And because I could recognize the tune, I thought I was doing so well. I had no idea that to anyone who knew music, who knew the song, and certainly who knew how the violin should be played, would just smile in amusement at my attempt. I didn't know enough to know how badly I was doing. And I'm not saying this to be discouraging, But sometimes at the start of learning to do something, we don't appreciate how much there is to do, and we also don't even know all it is that we will have to do. But whatever it is, we will have to practice, practice, practice. And with drawing, this practice is better done by starting with simpler subjects that have fewer technical demands and less complicated components to bring together. We can work on, say, proportions by starting with simpler shapes. We can also be developing our line work, perhaps our ability to draw straight lines freehand at that point. And possibly at this stage, I won't be worrying too much about things such as cross-hatching or applying tone. Maybe doing subjects that don't have extreme perspective, so that this is an easier thing at this stage for me to do well. I'll choose to draw a cottage rather than the Musée du Louvre when I'm at the start of my drawing journey, because I will learn more by drawing a cottage well than by drawing the Musée du Louvre badly. I will learn more by drawing daily for 15 minutes than by drawing for 3 hours trying to draw a masterpiece once a week. And of course, what I do in each of those 15-minute blocks will be very different to what I'll be attempting to do in a 3-hour drawing session. And while we're in this earlier stage of developing all of our basic skills, narrowing the tools that we use is very helpful. But I will learn more by mastering one or two than by going shallow in a lot of them. It is very helpful to be aware that drawing is a skill that we need to develop, and it has a lot in common with the method and the effort in learning a musical instrument. Being prepared for what's ahead is a great help in being able then to move through it. My third thing not to do is don't be my only critic. We all need to have someone who sometimes, preferably fairly regularly, we can ask, what do you think of this drawing? Not because we're fishing for compliments, but because we need a new set of eyes to see objectively something that we've seen appear line by line, which very often means we can't see it the way someone else will see it. We tolerate mistakes that we've made because we've got used to them as we've drawn the drawing. And of course, we're not looking for someone to say about our artwork, oh, that's rubbish. We're looking for someone who can look at what we've done and say, that bit there doesn't quite look right. Or these eyes look a bit crooked. Or there's something wrong with this side of the building, because these will be the things that will help show us where we need to focus as we continue to draw. And of course, I should be doing this process myself after every drawing. I should look at every drawing and ask, is this what I was hoping to see? And a lot of how we feel about our work will depend more on our personality than on our artwork. I might be inclined to think that everything I draw is rubbish because I drew it. Or I might be inclined to be very impressed with anything I draw because I drew it. But most of us are somewhere in between. And wherever we are, it's very helpful to have a new set of eyes. Someone who's not been poring over our reference photo for hours as the drawing was made, and someone who's not seen our drawing appear line by line. We can sometimes give ourselves a fresh way of seeing something which will help us see problems by holding our drawing up to a mirror and just flipping it into reverse, or by seeing it through our camera and therefore seeing it at a much smaller scale. That can often show to us problems with our drafting or our composition that aren't so obvious when we look at the actual drawing that we've made. It's so helpful to have someone in our drawing world who's the equivalent of the piano teacher who listens to the result of the piano practice that the student has been doing during the week, and who can give comments like, that's very good, this is better than what you were doing before, or the tempo's a bit uneven here, or whatever needs to be said to give us a focus for the practice that we're going to do in the week ahead. This person doesn't have to be an artist. Even if someone can just say to us, this doesn't look quite right, without being able to say precisely why, that still gives us a focus when we continue to draw. The most important thing is that we give them permission to be honest, that they know that anything they say will not hurt our feelings, that we're really not after compliments, we're after help in developing our drawing skills. So we should try and find someone when we're learning to draw who can be our drawing critic. Now, don't try and match up what I'm saying right now with what you're watching. This video is just one of my teaching videos as a background to what I'm saying, because my fourth point of what not to do when learning to draw is don't watch too many drawing teaching videos. And yes, I appreciate the irony of this. Teaching and learning when we draw are both great things, but not every teaching video is the same. Some are just of a poor standard, not very good teaching methods and process, and are not worth our time. Some are too advanced for the level we're at right now. Some are focused on things that I will never need to know because of how I want to draw and what I want to draw. But possibly most importantly, is that not all teaching videos are actually compatible with each other. There are different ways of learning and of teaching to draw, and some of them actually contradict each other. And it's not because either is wrong, but some approaches suit some people and some drawing styles and some ways of creatively thinking better than others. And to be honest, some of us find it easier to watch videos on how to draw instead of actually drawing. It's, less threatening. It's easier to think that in watching these videos I've somehow improved, that my drawing is better for the 10 videos I've watched this week, even though I haven't actually drawn a thing. Teaching videos help us to understand what we need to do, and they give us direction in doing it. But doing it, the actual drawing, still needs to be what we spend most of our time doing. Think of the piano again, a 30-minute lesson each week and then 7 hours of practice. And we're back to practice, practice, practice. So 4th point, don't watch too many drawing videos, but choose those that we do watch carefully, and then make sure that we practice what they've taught and build it into our drawing process and routine. And my 5th thing we shouldn't do when we're learning to draw is to copy the drawings of other artists. You've probably heard me say this before, but it's so important I'm saying it again. Think back to the idea of practicing. We practice what we want to get better at. There are some kookaburras. I'll leave this in. We practice what we want to get better at. So when we copy the work of other artists, what are we going to get better at? We're going to get better at copying the work of other artists. And that's great if I want to become skilled at copying. Problem is, if the place where I want to end up is being able to draw my own original drawings, copying the work of other artists won't take me to that place. It's a totally different pathway. And that's because copying won't require from me the crucial creative processes in my mind, in my thinking, the decisions I need to make before I put pen to paper. Instead, the artist whose work I'm copying is the one who's had to go through that process. And I'm just copying the choices that they've made. And in my opinion, these creative choices that we have to make in our minds, these creative decisions that we have to make about how we will represent our subject and how we put it onto paper, is the hardest part of drawing. It's not learning to draw a straight line. It's not learning to understand how perspective works. These are technical skills that we do need to learn and we do need to practice. But more difficult than actually learning to draw the line is learning what lines I need to draw in the first place to represent my subject the way I want. And I get no practice at these creative processes when I copy someone else's drawing. Zero, zip, nada. And this is why I kept hearing the comment from people, I get so frustrated because I copy other drawings and I get really good results. But when I go to do my own drawings, I don't even know where to put the first line. And the problem is that copying the work of other artists is a much easier thing to do to get a good looking drawing at the end, which I'm sure is one of the reasons we're tempted to do it, because we can get a good looking drawing fairly easily. And if, going back to our first point, I put too much emphasis on having a good looking drawing, then it's a very tempting thing to do, but it won't take me to the place I want to go to if where I want to go is my own original drawings. If I'm wanting to learn to draw, then I should avoid copying the drawings of other artists. Be inspired by them, but don't copy their work. Won't take me to the place I want to go. It will give me a false sense of how good I am, and that will ultimately be discouraging and make me think I've got no talent or that there's no point in me continuing to try and learn to draw. None of those things are true. It's just that I was misled about what drawing is and how easy it might be by copying rather than drawing. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. I've enjoyed the chance to share as a backdrop to this video some of the beautiful spots that are close by to where I live in Australia. I hope these points have been helpful. We live in an age where being self-taught is such a practical way to learn things, but it does have its difficulties as well. And I hope that these 5 points have helped to give a focus and a framework to navigate that process of finding resources and using them and developing skills without a formal framework or teacher. If I could summarize this all in one thing, it would be there is no substitute for drawing as much as we can. And to be continually looking at what we draw and asking, how can I improve this? So have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.